Have you ever wondered what would happen if Yuta Okatsu was born with the 6 eyes? The quiet, broken boy who accidentally cursed the girl he loved. Born with the rarest eyes in the entire Jujutsu world. What would Gojo do when he realized he was no longer the only one? How would the higher-ups react knowing that a second 6 eyes user existed completely outside of any clan bloodline? And most importantly, what happens when a boy carrying the Queen of Curses and the most powerful visual ability in Jujutsu history finally starts to understand what he truly is? Well, in this timeline, that is exactly what we are about to find out. Before we get into everything, there are two important things to keep in mind. First, Yuta is born with the 6 eyes, and that is the only change being made here. His childhood, his relationship with Rika Orimoto, the accident, the curse, all of it happens exactly as it did in the original story. Second, the 6 eyes do not automatically make Yuta unbeatable. Even Gojo himself needed years to fully master what his eyes could do. The 6 eyes give Yuta better cursed energy perception, better efficiency, better combat analysis, and better precision control, but raw strength still has to be built through experience, and Yuta is no exception to that. Yuta is born into a completely civilian family with no connection to the Jujutsu world whatsoever, but from the very start, something is noticeably off about his eyes. Doctors mention it once, his parents whisper about it at night, but nobody understands what they are actually looking at because the 6 eyes have not awakened yet, and they remain dormant for years. Then Rika dies in that accident, and everything changes. The moment Yuta's grief peaks, the moment that raw, overwhelming love transforms into something the Jujutsu world would call a cursed emotion, the 6 eyes activate for the very first time. It happens in an instant where Yuta blinks, and suddenly the invisible layer of the world floods into his vision all at once, with the cursed energy bleeding off the pavement and the spiritual residue hanging in the air from where the accident happened, and the shapes of things that normal people will never be able to see, all pouring into him from every direction simultaneously. He collapses right there in the middle of the street, completely overwhelmed, and he does not tell anyone about it because he does not know what any of it means. He just knows the world looks fundamentally different now, and that somewhere at the very edge of his vision always is Rika. Far away, Gojo stops completely mid-conversation, and after a brief pause says quietly that something interesting just happened, because through the 6 eyes he can feel that a second pair has opened somewhere in Japan, something that has never happened in recorded Jujutsu history. Gojo tracks the energy signature down within hours and finds a middle school boy in Tokyo with no clan affiliation, no training, and absolutely no understanding of what he actually is. Just a grieving kid with impossible eyes and a cursed spirit attached to him that registers as a special grade on every detection sensor the Jujutsu world has available. Gojo makes sure to get there before the higher-ups do, and that part is very deliberate. When he finds Yuta sitting alone in his apartment with his knees pulled to his chest and his eyes completely unfocused, Gojo crouches down to his level and looks at those eyes directly for the first time, and for just one brief moment, something crosses his face that looks almost like genuine recognition, the specific kind that only comes from seeing something you have personally experienced reflected back at you from someone else. Then he says quietly that Yuta has no idea what he is looking at, does he? And adds that neither did he at first. The higher-ups find out within days, and their reaction is complete panic. One 6 eyes user is something they have learned to manage, but 2 existing at the same time has simply never happened in any recorded Jujutsu history, and the cursed spirit attached to Yuta makes the situation significantly worse, because Rika, the Queen of Curses, is a special grade so powerful she does not fit into any classification they have, and when you combine that with a 6 eyes user who has no institutional loyalty and no clan oversight whatsoever, suddenly you have something that frightens even the people who voted without hesitation to execute Yuji Itadori. The vote for Yuta's execution passes almost unanimously, but Gojo vetoes it personally, simply walking into the meeting room and telling them flatly that Yuta is enrolling at Tokyo Jujutsu High under his direct supervision, and that anyone with a problem is welcome to come find him themselves. Nobody comes to find him. The Gojo clan reacts furiously separately, submitting formal complaints to the higher-ups demanding answers, but the higher-ups do nothing because the only alternative is directly confronting Gojo Satoru, and nobody in that building wants to do that. Yuta arrives at Jujutsu High and meets Maki, Toge, and Panda, and while in the original story he arrives completely terrified, begging to be isolated from the other students, in this timeline something is slightly different about him. The 6 eyes have been running non-stop since Rika died, and while that has been genuinely painful, it has also been quietly giving Yuta something valuable without him realizing it, which is months of involuntary observation of the cursed energy world every single day. He does not know the theory behind any of it yet, but the 6 eyes have been learning on their own the entire time. So when Gojo begins explaining the fundamentals of cursed energy to him, something clicks significantly faster than it should because Yuta has already been seeing it for months and just never had the words for what he was looking at. Gojo notices this immediately and begins pushing him considerably harder than he pushes the other students, because Gojo can see something through the 6 eyes that he finds slightly uncomfortable to admit even to himself, which is that Yuta has the genuine potential to surpass him someday. As the months pass, Yuta's fighting style develops in a noticeably different direction from the original timeline. He reads cursed energy signatures before attacks fully commit. He processes the flow of a technique while it is still mid-execution, and he anticipates with actual information rather than dodging on pure instinct. The problem is that his body is still physically catching up to what his eyes can already see. Gojo describes it perfectly when he watches Yuta take a hit from an attack he obviously saw coming and tells him without sympathy that his eyes are 3 seconds ahead of his body and that he needs to stop letting his body make the decisions. That single line changes everything about how Yuta trains from that point forward. His control over Rika also improves faster than in the original timeline, because the Six Eyes let him see the exact shape of her cursed energy output at all times, showing him where her emotions are creating instability in how her technique manifests. Slowly, he learns to work alongside that rather than constantly fighting against it. Suguru Ghetto has been observing Yuta carefully since the information first reached his network, and his thinking in this timeline is considerably more complicated than in the original story. Ghetto's entire plan during the night parade revolves around Rika, because the Queen of Curses is the prize he wants, and Yuta is almost secondary. But in this timeline, Yuta does not just have Rika, he has the Six Eyes, and Ghetto, who spent years alongside Gojo, understands exactly what that combination represents strategically. A Six Eyes user cannot be absorbed as a cursed spirit. Eliminating Yuta outright would be an enormous waste, and the gap between where Yuta currently sits and where his actual ceiling lands would be extraordinarily valuable under the right circumstances. So during the night parade, Ghetto approaches Yuta not to fight immediately, but to talk, telling him calmly that he knows what the higher-ups voted for when they found out about him, and that he knows the Jujutsu world does not have a real place for someone like him, and that eventually things they cannot categorize get eliminated. Yuta listens to all of this quietly, and then says simply that he knows, before adding that he just does not think any of it is a good enough reason to kill people who had nothing to do with it, and Ghetto pauses because that response is genuinely not what he expected. The fight that follows is brutal and heavily one-sided in Ghetto's favor because his experience and his cursed spirit army are overwhelming, and Yuta loses ground repeatedly, but the Six Eyes give him the ability to read which spirits Ghetto is preparing to deploy before he actually deploys them. Not perfectly every time, but consistently enough that Yuta stays alive considerably longer than he has any right to, and then Rika responds to his desperation fully. And when that happens, the Six Eyes do something Yuta was not expecting at all, because they let him see Rika clearly for the very first time, not as a weapon he is trying to control, but as Rika herself, with the actual shape of her cursed energy and the love and grief and protectiveness woven into every single layer of it becoming completely visible to him. Yuta stops trying to use her and just calls her name the way you call the name of someone you have been missing, and Rika responds with absolutely everything she has. Ghetto retreats, the night parade ends, and Yuta survives. But the moment of Rika's release is different, because Yuta does not just feel the truth this time. He sees it through the Six Eyes with complete clarity, the exact shape of what her curse has always actually been, which is simply love that had nowhere to go after she died. When he finally gives it somewhere to go and says goodbye properly while seeing her clearly, the curse dissolves more completely and more peacefully than it did the first time, and Rika smiles at him one last time before she is gone. In the weeks after the night parade, Jujutsu High settles into a quiet that feels genuinely earned, and Yuta sits alone on the school rooftop with his eyes still active the way they always are now. It does not overwhelm him the way it did when he first arrived, because he has learned to manage it, even if managing it is never entirely comfortable and probably never will be. Gojo appears beside him without warning the way he always does, and after they stay quiet together for a while, Gojo mentions casually that the higher-ups submitted another formal complaint about Yuta's enrollment, the third one that month, and when Yuta asks what he told them, Gojo says the same thing he always says, which is no. After another stretch of silence, Gojo says something he would not say to anyone else in a tone that does not sound like him at all, which is precisely why it lands the way it does, telling Yuta straightforwardly that he is going to surpass him someday, not as encouragement or as a challenge, but simply as an observation of something he has already seen through the Six Eyes. Yuta is quiet for a long moment before asking if that is all right with Gojo, and Gojo actually considers the question seriously before telling him to ask again when it happens, and somewhere that is not the Jujutsu world anymore, somewhere that cursed energy does not reach, and where grief does not follow. A girl with warm eyes and a quiet smile watches the boy she loved become something the world was not entirely prepared for, and she is not sad about it at all.